For those of you that I don't know, I'm Ray Comiskey. I'm president here at Jefferson College, and I want to welcome you to our Jefferson County Growth Association Legislative Breakfast. We're really glad that you're here. Before we get to the food, let me do a couple of formalities. First of all, if you're on the Growth Association board, would you please stand up? So let's give them a round of applause for all their hard work. And they're not in the room right now, but I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Amy Aitzer for her work from the Growth Association, and my assistant Lisa Vineyard for the work she did out of our office to organize this. So they made it happen. Let me just put it that way. You'll hear me mention these a couple times during the program, but I did want to take a moment and recognize our sponsors here this morning. They're the ones that make the breakfast happen. So as you talk to folks, we recognize Comtree, Mercy, Govero Land Services, Debbie Dunnigan, Sheet Metal Workers Local 36, Home Service Oil, and Good Phone. That's right on cue. That's the key. I also wanted to, of course, thank KGF Radio and JCTV for broadcasting our event today. So if you know people that say, oh, darn, I couldn't make it, why, they'll be able to catch it on our website if nothing else. So, all right, well, with that, I'd like to start our morning off with a greeting from our organization president, Dan Govero. So, Dan.
Thank you. Glad you all get to come today. This is one of our great events that we have, and this is one that's free, thanks to our sponsors. So you don't have that very often that you get a free event. So we have a lot of things going on. Our whole goal here is to promote the county and your businesses and make this county grow. And so we're working very hard at it. One of our biggest campaigns is the Shop Jefferson County campaign, because that brings the taxes in and keeps them here in Jefferson County. Without that, we can't have the fire, the police, ambulance protection, the schools, college. They all appreciate the taxes that we spend here, so let's keep them down here if we can. Everything you spend here stays here, so that's one of our big goals. We have a lot of things we're going to try to do this year again. Is the golf tournament's coming up. If you haven't done a sponsorship, see Scott back here. And they're looking for golf teams and hole sponsors. They're pretty darn reasonable with $125 for a hole sponsor. So we need to fill that up because that's one of our big fundraisers. We'll have a membership meeting in August, and that will be some business type related topic. We always try to have a good turnout for that. The Jeffersonian Awards is another one of our great big events where we recognize big business, small business, individuals, and organizations that help promote the county. So that's a big prestigious event we do. A holiday party will be in December. In September, we're going to try to do another Motorama, which benefits the College Foundation and the organization. And this is, we got some flyers out here. And again, we're trying to get this to grow bigger and bigger. The people that come really like the campus. A lot of them didn't even know the campus was out here, so they got a chance to see it. And we have a pretty good turnout of some really nice cars. So we try to put that on. If you're not a member, please join. We need membership. The only way we can grow and promote this county is with membership. And Amy would love to take your membership. We have the forms out there. She can do a credit card today and sign you right up before you leave. So we're trying to capture that so we can get the membership up. We're also doing something different today. On your table you'll find a card, and it's called the Let's Talk. Tell us what we can do for you. We're trying to get input from all the people out here to what the Growth Association needs to do for them. You know, we kind of try to guess what we need. We've done some things in the past, some forums and that, and this is another way we want to reach out to find out what you need so we can provide that information and help your business and the county grow. So we're looking for that information, so please fill out the cards and give them to us when you leave. We'll really appreciate it. The other thing we're trying to do, and Scott Seek's been working real hard on this, and it takes a lot of time, is we're redoing a whole new website It's going to be a really terrific website. It's going to be connected. We're doing tourism. It'll be in the website. So we're going to try to really get a new good tourism program going for Jefferson County. I read the Missouri tourism book. We're not in it, and we should be. And so that's another goal I want to get, is us in the book, so that we can get people down here to Jefferson County to all the events we have, which we have many. So that's just another goal we want to do. So anything I can do to help, we will keep it on track and keep it going. Please join our association and help us grow. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. I'm still trying to figure out what makes this great. The subject matter, legislative stuff, the free breakfast. I'm not sure what makes it great, but it is a great event. Well, we always put him in this position. He is the guy that stands between you and breakfast. So we will ask Rick Francis to come up and give us the invocation this morning.
Good morning. Let's pray together, please. Our dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day and this freedom to assemble here together, that we never take it for granted. Thank you for those who gave their lives to protect this freedom and those who serve now to protect this freedom. Thank you for this event that we have here today and those that have sponsored it. Bless those public servants that represent us as we make our lives better in the future. Bless the food that we're having today and those that prepared it. Be with us and give us safe journeys throughout the day. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Jefferson County Growth Association Legislative Breakfast for 2015. We're really pleased that you're here this morning. And before we get started, I do want to recognize our sponsors, the Sheet Metal Workers, Local 36, Governor Land Services, Comtree Comprehensive Health Center, Mercy Hospital, of course, Debbie Dunnigan, and Home Service Oil. We also want to thank KJF Radio for broadcasting us this morning, as well as JCTV. For those of you who might miss part of our broadcast, you can come back through the college website and see us that way. Well, we have a great program for you this morning, and we want to get right to it because it's been an exciting legislative session, to say the least. We're broadcasting to you from Jefferson College, and it's our pleasure to have you on campus this morning. Our topic, of course, is the legislative session, and that's all about passing laws and moving the state of Missouri along. And before we get into our program, if you give me a moment to talk about some of the laws that perhaps have been passed over the years that maybe haven't had the desired effect, or that we look at today that don't quite make sense. So I came across a book called Strange United States Laws by Robert Pelton. And here's a few examples of laws that maybe we don't want to hear our legislators talk about. In Ottumwa, Iowa, it is unlawful for any male person within the corporate limits of the city to wink at any female person with whom he is unacquainted. In Zion, Illinois, it is illegal for anyone to give lighted cigars to dogs, cats, or other domesticated animals kept as pets. That apparently was a big problem. In Carmel, New York, a man can't go outside while wearing a jacket and pants that do not match. My wife wrote that law for me. Thank you. In Gary, Indiana, persons are prohibited from attending a movie house or other theater and from riding a public streetcar within 4 hours of eating garlic. In Miami, it's illegal for men to be seen publicly in any kind of strapless gown. Apparently that was a problem. In St. Louis, it's illegal to sit on the curb of any city street and drink beer from a bucket. I think we all know what that refers to. In Hartford, Connecticut, you aren't allowed to cross the street while walking on your hands. In Baltimore, it's illegal to throw bales of hay from a second-story window within the city limits. It's also illegal to take a lion to the movies. And then finally, in Nicholas County, West Virginia, no member of the clergy is allowed to tell jokes or humorous stories from the pulpit during a church service. So I'm sorry we don't have that rule here. You had to endure mine. So, well, on a more serious note. This has been quite a legislative session, as I mentioned. There were over 2,000 pieces of legislation this year passed in the Missouri legislature. Only 133 bills, including one House concurrent resolution and one Senate concurrent resolution, made it through the process to final passage. This includes 18 appropriation bills. And of those bills that were truly agreed to and finally passed, many of these are what are considered consent bills, which means they are generally non-controversial and carry no fiscal impact to the state. Governor Nixon has until July 14th to either sign or veto the bills passed during the legislative session. All legislation passed into law by Governor Nixon will become effective on August 28th, 2015, unless the legislation provided for a specific effective date or contained an emergency clause. Also, if the governor takes no action, the bill does become law. The Missouri General Assembly passed the state's $26 billion operating budget 2 weeks prior to the constitutional deadline. Governor Nixon signed the budget almost in its entirety, with 2 exceptions related to the language errors. The governor praised the legislature for passing a balanced budget, which members of the House and Senate generally believed to have a $90 million surplus. The major highlights of the fiscal year 2016 include record increases for both elementary and secondary education, imagine me mentioning this, as well as for higher education, dental benefits for Medicaid recipients, and managed care expansion for participants statewide. The governor still has the power to withhold any approved funds if he deems it necessary, although there may be up for a challenge if that occurs. The legislative session brought a variety of activity to Jefferson City on topics related to Medicaid expansion, and unfortunately the death of an unarmed black male in Ferguson, the suicide of Auditor Tom Schweik in February, and then the suicide of his press secretary a month later really rocked Jefferson City. The session slowly returned to normal until it ground to a halt in the last week of the session. 2 major factors led to the last week of the session being one of the most unusual weeks in the Missouri General Assembly. During the last week, the Senate brought up the controversial topic of right to work. The Senate Majority Floor Leader, Senator Ron Richard, used a parliamentary procedure to end debate and force a vote, referred to as, quote, the previous question. Senate Democrats reacted by filibustering everything that was brought to the floor for debate. The disagreements brought an end to the legislative session, with hundreds of bills left on the Senate calendar without any final action. Only one piece of legislation passed the Senate last week. To make the last week of session even more shocking, of course, Speaker of the House, Representative John Deal, resigned his speakership and legislative seat after allegations were published that the Speaker was involved in a text scandal with sexual overtones with a college intern. Speaker Deal issued a statement taking full responsibility for his actions and apologized to his colleagues. Therefore, on its final day, the Missouri legislature elected House Majority Leader Todd Richardson as their new Speaker. As Representative Richardson is not termed out until 2018, he could be the Speaker for the next 3 sessions. So that's the summary that brings us to our program today. I want to say firsthand that as one who spends time in Jefferson City, it's always a great pleasure to work with these legislators. As a county, as a region, we get great support. These folks work across party lines for the betterment of Jefferson County, and I think you'll hear that resound soundly through our program today. So we will begin by inviting Senator Paul Whelan to the podium, and he'll kick us off. So Paul, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, Ray said pretty much everything that I was going to say. You're a mind reader, I think, you know. So now I'm going to do an audible. I'm going to shift off of how weird the session was because he kind of covered a lot of that. But it was my first session as a senator, and so I'll share some thoughts about that. I'll leave some of the details to my colleagues to go through as far as what got passed and stuff. When I first was elected to the Senate, I started doing a little bit of research, and it's kind of interesting in the Missouri Senate in that before term limits, a newly elected senator was pretty much expected to be there and keep his mouth shut and his head down and learn. And so that was always the tradition. They didn't even file bills. I mean, they would answer roll call votes, but pretty much other than that, they were expected to sit there. Now, we're in a different time now with term limits in effect, so I knew that that wasn't really a realistic thing to do, but I wanted to kind of mirror that as much as I could to gain the respect from my colleagues. So I deliberately did not file any legislation until February 1st. And originally I didn't want to file any legislation, but it's like impossible to do that. There's only 34 senators, and there's so many people that want things to get done that people keep coming to you. So finally, after about 2 weeks, I said, okay, I'm not going to do anything until February 1st, hoping that people would go away. And they did until February 1st. And then they came back and said, okay, we're here. Now you're going to file this bill for us. So I ended up filing about 13, 14 pieces of legislation. And my expectations were low. I thought, well, you know, I don't really care if I pass anything this year. I want to learn the process, how things work in the Senate. Well, believe it or not, we did end up passing one bill on the very last day. It was one that was over, we got it out of the Senate early and it was over in the House, and they were able to pass that. So that was kind of it was a learning experience, and I'm looking forward to next year because next year we're going to hit the ground more running. And the other thing that, you know, as far as sitting down and trying not to get involved in the debate and stuff, was easy January, February, March. By April and May, I was getting so aggravated with some of the things that my colleagues were saying. I was dying to stand up and start talking, but I held myself to my commitment that I wasn't going to stand up and talk a lot. But I did stand up and talk on a few bills that had technical stuff, not really making a political passionate plea, but more or less getting an understanding of how the legislation worked and making corrections to make the legislation work better. It was a very unusual session. The people that I've talked to have been up there lobbyists. Some of them have been there 40, 50 years, have said they've never seen anything like this session. I had anticipated all year long that the Republican majority in the Senate were going to take up the right to work and they were going to use the previous question. But what I anticipated was that they would do that about 3 o'clock on Friday the last week to where everything was pretty much done. What threw me off was on Tuesday when they brought up the issue, which meant pretty much nothing was going to get done on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. We'll have to see how this transcends into next session because there's still a lot of hard feelings, but as time goes by, wounds get healed and people start talking to each other again. A good sign, I guess I would say, that the Senate's going to come back together and hopefully function for the citizens of Missouri is on the last day, the Democrats and Republicans came together to pass an FRA bill, which is a bill that basically funds Medicaid in the state. And that had to be done or it would have had a $3 billion deficit to the budget. So on the last day, we came together, got that done, and that's pretty much the last thing that we got done. So for a first year, it was very unusual, very exciting. I was kind of cheated, I thought. From being in the House, the last week is just everything flies, flies by and is very exciting and it's hard to keep track of everything. And I thought, how would that be in the Senate? So all year I was waiting for the last week to see how exciting this was going to be. And nothing happened the last week. So I guess I'll have to wait till next year to find that out. But it was a learning experience. There's a few things, I'll give you one or two things that I find that really are different from the House and the Senate. One is in the House, they have, if you've ever been up there, they have a big old scoreboard and you vote at your desk, you press a button. So if you're visiting with constituents or you're working on legislation in your office and they ring the bell, you come running into chambers, you look up, you know what you're doing, and you can vote accordingly. In the Senate, there is no board, there's a chime, not a bell, and they call a roll. And when they call your name, you say aye or nay. So in the Senate, when they ring the chimes, you go running in, you have, unless you're paying attention, listening to the speaker, like in your office, you have no idea what you're voting on. And your colleagues don't want to help you at all. And in the House, they would be glad to tell you, you want to vote yes on this, you want to vote no on this. In the Senate, they want to sit there and smile at you and go, I don't know what, you vote however you want, you know. So they're not very much help. So that was a very big difference. Another big difference is the hours, and that may just be our floor leader. In the House, very seldom did we work past 8 o'clock at night. In the Senate, I think we were there one time till 4 o'clock in the morning, another time till after midnight. I finally went to talk to the floor leader and I said, you know, everybody says the Senate's got all these old white guys in there. It's true, we do. You can't work us till 4 o'clock in the morning, somebody's gonna have a heart attack. But he said, well, we're gonna do what we're gonna do. You guys know Senator Richards, we're gonna do what we're gonna do and just, hang on, get used to it. So those were some of the big changes. It was the work schedule and just adapting to having to pay close attention to what's going on because when you go out on the floor, you got to be ready to vote. You got to know what you're doing. So, anyway, those are some of my reflections of the first year. I thank Jefferson County Growth Association for all the work that you guys do here. This is a great event. I look forward to it every year, and I will turn it over to Ray to introduce one of my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Paul Whelan, and I will let you have a busy time next year so I won't have to steal all your activities for my speech. One thing I will note is that Paul, of course, is on the Port Commission. He does a great amount of work on behalf of port development in Missouri, which is really important in Jefferson County, and we did take a group from the Growth Association up to Jefferson City earlier this year, and it was one of the major topics we talked about, so some exciting things coming down the road. Also in the Senate is Senator Gary Romine, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today. However, his staff assistant, Dan Hutton, sorry, I just blanked, is here with us, and he's going to cover a couple things from the Senator's perspective. So Dan, come on up.
a pleasure to be here on behalf of the Senator today. In our office, we really focused on three things this session. That is fighting the EPA, putting forward good business legislation, and as Vice Chair of Education, on education issues. We were able to get three major bills passed on the EPA front. First of all, the history of lead in this area is prominent, to say the least. Natural occurring substance. The Senator has worked very diligently since he first came into the Senate on this issue to try to revitalize the lead industry. He has done that through the Lead Industry Task Force that they came up with 3 years ago. That was reauthorized this year, so we'll be continuing that work for the next 2 years on that committee to try to figure out how we can further that industry. We also, here in Jefferson County, you have Rush Island. We had a bill, Senate Bill 445, that allowed Ameren to pay for monitors so they can monitor their SO2. Environmentalists tend to want to use modeling, but this will give us an exact accounting of the SO2 levels, which would be ensures accuracy and ensures that health is protected and the business doesn't have to pay $600 million for scrubbers unless they absolutely have to. On the third front, Senate Bill 142, what that bill did is, it is about the clean energy plan of the Obama administration. What it does is it gives us a legislative check on any plan that DNR comes up with. That has to now go to the legislature and the Joint Committee on Government Accountability for review. That at least gives the legislators an opportunity to comment on what DNR is doing to implement these new regulations that the feds are coming down with. On the business front, right to work, we voted against that. It didn't make a lot of sense to us. It's being pushed as an economic development tool. However, we tend to think that why would any business want to locate in Missouri when we can't even match federal funding on our highways? That to us is a much bigger issue. Also, we filed a bill that did not pass on employment discrimination. We think that is a big issue here in Missouri. The legal climate is important to attract new businesses, and not only that, but to protect the businesses that are already here. The senator also filed a loser pays bill. We probably will not refile that one next year. He just wasn't as comfortable with that issue as he is with other ones. On the education front, we had a CTE bill, a certificate for a career and technical education. The thought behind that is, and I think the direction you're going to see education going in the future is, rather than a K-12 strategy, it'll be more of a K-16. This bill gives a high school student an added certificate that they have certain credentials in a career and technology field that they can take to a business or translate to a community college technical program or a tech school like Lynn Tech. That was our major bill in education. And he voted against the transfer bill. He actually thought that bill was worse than last year's bill. We have not discussed whether he will vote to sustain a veto if that were to occur. And I think that's about it. So thanks for having me today.
All right, well, we want to move to the House now, and you know, I used to have to juggle the schedule and alternate Democrat and Republican and balance out seniority and all that. Well, it's pretty easy this year. So we'll now invite the lone Democrat in the House, Ben Harris, up top. Ben?
Thank you, sir. Well, first, I just want to thank Jefferson College, the sponsors, and the radio stations for having us here this morning. And it's always good to come back home. I went to Jefferson College for 5 years, and a lot of people tell me, well, Ben, isn't it a junior college? And you were there for 5 years? I'm like, well, you know, it takes, when you really like a place, you want to stick around for a while. But I always liked Jefferson College. I got my associate's degree here. Then I used a 2+2 program through Missouri Baptist University and got my bachelor's degree here. But I always like to mention that, you know, I went 5 years at a junior college. That always gets it started. But I always talk a few things about the session. This was my 5th year, and this is also my 5th time being here at the, used to be called Eggs and Issues, if I remember correctly, back in the time there. But we had several bills that kind of went on, and we had a tax amnesty bill that did pass this year. We've had it every year that I've been in the legislature, and this is the first year that it actually made it to the finish line. And the tax amnesty bill, it kind of establishes a temporary amnesty period from September 1st, 2015 through November 30th of 2015, which gives taxpayers that can pay delinquent state taxes with penalties and fees and interest being waived. And this was actually really needed to be passed this year because the tax amnesty money that would be coming in was put into the budget. So it was already this money that, the money that was going to come in, which is millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, was used in the budgeting process. So they were counting on it for the budget, so if it didn't pass, we're short. So it did make it through the finish line and everything as well. Then we also had which I guess was one of the first bills we went through, or was actually a resolution, HCR 4, which blocked our pay increase. There was a recommendation for elected officials to get a pay increase this year. And the only way to stop that is we have to pass a resolution to end it. And we passed that out of the House actually pretty quickly early in the year, and we had a time period. We had to pass it by a certain date. And then actually, I believe the Senate passed it on the last day that they could without it automatically going into effect. So no pay increases for elected officials. Make sure that's clear. But we also did a muni court reform, which was Senate Bill 5. That lowered existing caps on how much revenue cities may derive from fees and fines and stuff like that, which I think was a good bill. I voted for it, and it passed with big numbers in the House and Senate. And so there was a lot of, I guess, small municipalities, and I think like St. Louis County has 92 municipalities in St. Louis County, and a lot of them are almost like, they get almost all their money from fines and fees and pulling people over. And so I think that was a good bill that went through, and it's not perfect, but no bill is really perfect. And so it went through. And there was a lot of things that didn't go through that should have. And we talk about ethics reform every year. In the beginning of the year, we talk about ethics reform, and Missouri is still the only state in the country that allows unlimited campaign contribution limits, unlimited lobbyist gifts, special interest gifts, and basically zero transparency of where the money's coming from. And every year we talk about it, it's in the papers, and it's always, oh, this is going to be the year, and it never goes anywhere. We had one bill that did come out of the House that had I believe, a $25 cap on gifts. And there was amendments out there to try to expand it, to put other things on there as well. But I guess what's more, I guess, was it a $25 dinner or is it a $100,000 campaign check? Which is going to, sway you a little bit more? So I definitely think we need some kind of ethics reform. And every year I've sponsored and co-sponsored legislation to reinstate campaign contribution limits, to put cooling off periods on there where you can't be a legislator one day and then come back the next day and be a lobbyist or something like that. And that's a problem. I think we have a revolving door up there. And we need to stop that. And by having at least like a 2-year cooling off period, I think would be a fair a time period that you could come back around. And stuff, and also I know I've surveyed it multiple times in my district, and that's Medicaid reform, expansion. I've polled it multiple times in my district's surveys, and it's over 60% of the people support it. And currently we have over 300,000 Missourians that are in this hole, and they're having some major problems there. And I understand some of the concerns and the money and stuff like that, and they say it's a broke system, and so well let's fix it. Not doing anything. That doesn't solve any problems. And we might not agree on all the things like that, but we could at least reform it and do some stuff. If they say it's broke and you do nothing, what are you accomplishing? So I think we need to at least look at that and see where the problem is. And I know there's waste and there's abuse and there's problems in there, but let's get in there and fix these issues and move forward with it. And I know they mentioned earlier, a couple of speakers, about the so-called right to work and everything, which I definitely oppose. I just don't see how lowering wages for workers and taking benefits away from them can be a good thing. If you look at other states that do our right to work, their standard of living is lower, I mean, everything's lower. Their life expectancy is even lower in right to work. Everything's lower in the right to work states. And I just don't think that's a good direction to go. And not only the way they mentioned earlier, by bringing it up early in that last week, it pretty much shut the whole place down. And I knew they were going to do that, but I figured they'd wait till, Friday, and that way you could get everything else done. And instead, they did it in the beginning of the week and shut it all down. And out of my 5 years that I've been there, every last week, that whole last week has been it's crazy. I mean, you don't know if they're coming or going and what's going on. Bills are flying around and they're changing. They're coming out of conference committees and you don't even know what they changed, and they just force for votes on it. And this last week was that last week of session was different because it was slow. Even like the second to last day, the Thursday, which is usually just all we did was approve the journal and that was it. In the second to last day of session, which is usually one of the busiest days of the year, we came in at 10 o'clock, adjourned till I think it was 2 or 3 o'clock, then approved the journal, and that was it. And so to me, that was disappointing that we had so much on the calendar to do. Even if the Senate was blocking and doing stuff, we had a lot of things on our calendar that we still could clear. And we did a lot of that the last day. What we could do is we had a lot of bills that we dropped the conference committees reports on. That way we could bring the other version up and pass it, and then went straight to the governor. Because if we would have passed them with the conference committee's changes on there, that would have forced them to go back to the Senate, which we knew would be done. So there were several bills that we did that on the last day, but we could have done that on multiple bills. There's a lot more legislation out there that we could have dropped we would have rejected and voted down accepting the conference committee reports, and then it would have went to the lower bill there, and then we could have passed that, and then it would have straight to the governor. And so I was kind of disappointed on that there was a lot of legislation we left on the table that we could have sent to the governor and bypassed the Senate altogether on. But I just want to, again, in closing, I just want to thank Jefferson College and the sponsors and the radio to have us here this morning. It's always a great pleasure to be here and to meet a bunch of great people that always come out and everything. And thank you.
All right, thank you, Representative Harris. Again, for our listeners and our viewers, you're listening to the Jefferson County Growth Association Legislative Breakfast 2015. I'm Dr. Ray Comiskey, and we're coming to you live from Jefferson College. Pleased to host this event as we do every year. Our sponsors today, again, are Home Service Oil, the Sheet Metal Workers Local 36, Govero Land Services, Comtree, Mercy, and Debbie Dunnigan, let's not forget her. Also want to thank KJF Radio and JCTV for all the hard work putting this event together. As a college president, I'd be remiss too if I didn't acknowledge that in our audience today, I have two board members, Ron Skaggs and John Winkelman, so thank you guys for being here, I appreciate that. Next up on our dais is Representative Elaine Gannon, and she's always been a great supporter of particularly education issues in Jefferson County, but is a real fighter for what she believes in, and she's shown that again this legislative session. So, Elaine, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kaminsky and Jefferson College and the JCGA for making today possible. I also attended Jefferson College. We called it Jefferson Junior College back then. Probably a lot of you can relate to that. And I can honestly say it was probably the best 2 years of my educational career. I would also like to thank Rick Francis for blessing us in his prayer this morning. We need it, okay? So keep those prayers coming, especially after a session like we had this year. But back in January, I returned to Jeff City for my second term, and I was eager to get there and work with my colleagues across the state to make things better for the people of Missouri and for the people of our districts. I served on 2 education committees. I was vice chair of the Education Appropriations Committee, and I was also vice chair of Emerging Issues in Education. And that was a tremendous learning experience for me. I also served on children and families with disabilities and tourism. So Dan, okay? I'll have to check on getting Jefferson County into the tourism book. And I know exactly what book you're talking about. It's a very nice book. Early in the session, Governor Nixon gave his State of the State address, and he called for an increase in funding for K through 12 schools, early childhood programs, as well as higher education. And in the end, the governor signed House Bill 2, which puts an additional $84 million into the fund for public schools. Funding for higher education institutions were increased by $12 million based on performance. I sponsored House Bill 405, which was an education bill, which would allow DESE to pay up to 50% of the HiSET test, which is similar to the GED. Missouri no longer administers the GED. Missouri administers the HiSET test, and this is for students who have, for some reason or another, dropped out of high school. This passed in the House overwhelmingly, and there was not enough time left in the session, especially the way it ended, for it to make it through the Senate. So I will file that bill early on next session. One bill in particular that I would like to mention today is House Bill 150, which is an unemployment reform legislation. And this bill basically cuts benefits to as low as 13 weeks from the current 20 weeks linked to the statewide average unemployment rate. I, along with several other Republicans, voted no on House Bill 150. And here's why I voted no. A lot of legislators considered this a bill for labor unions, or a bill that the labor unions would be against. My thinking was, no, this is not just about unions, this is a worker bill. This was going to hurt people whether they worked for a union or did not work for a union. One of my legislator friends who supported this bill said to me, well, my dad worked for the union, and he was a union laborer, and when he went on strike, he went down the street and found another job. And my reply to that was, well, we're not living in the 50s and 60s anymore. We can't go down the street and find another job equal to the job that we had pay-wise to support our family, make our house payment, and feed our kids. Somebody who loses their job and they're making $75,000 or $80,000 a year and they own their home, and then they have to go out and try and find a comparable job, there's just not enough time. 20 or 13 weeks is not enough time to train, learn new skills, and find a new job. And also, I looked at my very rural and depressed district, and so many in my district are struggling. I have one of the most rural districts in the state of Missouri. So in the end, I voted my district and I voted my conscience, and that night I was able to put my head on my pillow and go to sleep and felt good about my vote. Before I close, I would just like to say that the incoming freshman class hit the floor running this year. They're very smart, they're very talented. Only two of them were here today, but they've done a great job, and I believe that they will be telling you about their bills that made it to the floor and are probably, if they didn't go somewhere this year, will in the future. As has already been said, the last week of session was very difficult. The halls were silenced. There were just, I think everybody was somewhat in a state of shock. But we did move quickly to elect a new floor leader, Representative Todd Richardson from Poplar Bluff. And he's our new speaker. Todd is a very honorable man, and I look forward to seeing the direction that he leads us in the next 3 years. It's a pleasure serving the state of Missouri and Jefferson City, and if ever I can be of any help, feel free to call me. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Elaine. All right, now, as Elaine mentioned, she stole my script now. So we have two new faces with us on the dais, and we will start with Representative Becky Ruth. Becky?
Thank you, Dr. Comiskey. Thank you, Jefferson College, and thank you, KJEF J98 radio station for this morning, and JCGA. Boy, what a first session. We as freshmen really got to cut our teeth. As everyone has mentioned previously, it was quite an unusual session. For us, it was our first session, so there was nothing else there to compare it to. I would also like to say that our freshman class, I believe, is a very good, solid freshman class. As freshmen in the House, as Paul mentioned in the Senate, we're kind of told as newbies you need to kind of sit back, listen, and learn. Well, the learning part works well for me. The being quiet doesn't work very well for me. So, this year I was privileged to be elected as our class vice president, as the secretary of the Women Legislators of Missouri. I was also privileged to be appointed to the Point of Order team, and also something very valuable here to our county, which is we developed the House Port Caucus this year, and I was elected as the chairman of the House Port Caucus. So we worked with Senator Whelan when the governor was withholding that $3 million for our ports in our state, and we were very vocal about that and asked him to get that money released. He eventually did. I thought it was very interesting shortly after Senator Whelan's press conference, and I was there and several other Jefferson Countyans were there. The governor released those funds. So we're working very hard to make sure we get funds coming this way towards our Jefferson County port. That's going to be one of our largest economic development tools that we have, not just for Jefferson County, but for our whole entire state. With the eventuality of the expansion of the Panama Canal in 2016, the possibility of trade with Cuba, our ports are going to become very, very important in our state. You've got to get the goods there. Missouri is a top exporter of agriculture through our ports. About 35% of what's shipped on the Mississippi River comes from here in Missouri and is agriculture. So very, very important, and I look forward to hopefully helping to shape some of that and the direction that the ports are going to take here in our state. I was also just appointed to the Conference of Southern Legislators on the Humanity and Public Safety Committees. So that's something that not a lot of freshmen have the opportunity to do, so I'm looking forward to representing Missouri on that committee as well. On the state level, I served on 5 committees: local government, elementary, secondary, and education, appropriations for health, mental health, and social services, health and mental health policy, and select committee on insurance. This year we had a new committee structure. And I think it went very well. And how that was proposed is we have our regular standing committees, but above those we have what we call our select committees. So the bills are very well vetted in our standing committees. Then they go to a select committee, and they're vetted again. So before a bill ever hits the floor, it's going to go through those 2 committees. And that that select committee is made up of members that were on those standing committees. So that way there is some knowledge of those bills before it ever hits that committee, what happened, what the vote was like, anybody in favor or opposed. All of that information is taken into consideration before those bills ever hit the floor. So it just made it a more streamlined process, and I think that enabled us to get better bills out onto the floor this year. I filed 3 bills this year, one of them education related. That bill would have placed a current active classroom teacher on the State Board of Education. Right now, we don't have any practicing educators. We have some former educators on our State Board of Education, but we don't have anybody that's actually in the classroom that understands how those policies are going to affect those children that are sitting in that classroom. And I think that's very important that we do that. It unfortunately did not get passed. I will come back. We've tweaked it, and we will refile that again next year and see where that goes. The other bill that I had addressed the issue with landlord-tenant laws and trying to get those landlord-tenant issues expedited through our court systems more quickly. Right now, it takes an incredibly long amount of time to be able to get a tenant out of a property and for everybody to move on, for that tenant, for that landlord. You may have a tenant sitting in a property, you know, for 60 days, 90 days, there's no rent being paid, the property could be torn up, there's a lot of legal expense involved. So we were searching for ways to try to get that through our court system more smoothly for both parties so everybody can move on and get a nice result out of that. Again, that bill is going to need a little bit of tweaking. I did pass a bill this year. Out of our freshman class, we passed a total of 8 bills, which was really great for freshmen. One of them was my House Bill 778. There is a disease called 22q chromosome deletion. What that is a chromosomal deletion that causes things like heart defects, cleft palate, clubfoot, ADHD, autism. And this is an awareness week that will make the 22nd week of each year 22q Awareness Week. We're trying to get the word out to more health professionals as well as citizens about this because oftentimes those things like heart defects are so major that they're just looking at that and they don't see that underlying cause. And with that underlying cause, if it's 22q, that child's probably going to have other issues as they go further down the road. This way, by getting that out there and they know about the 22q, then the families, the health practitioners are in a better place to understand what could happen later on with the child. So that was a very important bill for me, and it is on its way to the governor's desk. I was in Jeff City yesterday. We had a technical session. I actually walked onto the House floor right as new Speaker Todd Richardson was signing my bill. So very exciting. So other things that happened, I'd like to talk just a little bit about House Bill 42, which was the student transfer bill. I did not vote in favor of that. I believe that we've got to do something for these kids that are stuck in these schools in our failing school districts, but I don't believe that the bill went far enough. Our House bill, the bill that came out of the House, I believe was a good bill, and I voted for that. It came back with some changes to it out of the Senate, and really it expanded charter schools and it expanded virtual schools, and the expansion of charter schools that it was allowing were already in high-performing school districts that really didn't fit that need. I feel like we need to just be looking at these schools that are failing school districts right now. If we're going to have a transfer bill, we've got to try to fix this. And you know, it didn't address a lot of the issues that we really needed to address. It didn't cap the tuition rate. There were some issues with funding for the transportation. So I would like to see us hopefully pass a better bill, and that we're really looking out for the best interest of the students in those school districts. The other bill I'd like to talk about is Senate Bill 24. And I believe it was mentioned a little bit earlier. This is the welfare reform bill. We cut the TANF benefits down to 45 months. They were originally 60 months. That may sound devastating, but if we remember that TANF is supposed to be temporary assistance to needy families, and actually took that money that we're saving by cutting it down to 45 months, and we're reinvesting it into child care, education, transportation, and job training for these families, so that way they can actually get out of that cycle, get out there, be able to get a job, and feel better about themselves because they are able to provide for their families and break that cycle of consistently staying on those welfare benefits and getting them out there to be successful for their families and for themselves and for parts of our communities. House Bill 116, right to work. I would echo what Representative Harris said. I don't think that it's something that we need. And when we look at our workforce, only 8% of our workforce is really union. So this is something that's not going to be good for our working families, especially our working families here in Jefferson County. When we have bills like this, I think that it's important to look at our constituents, and I try to do that with every bill that comes up. I look at my constituents first, who I'm representing first. We had the Dairy Revitalization Act that came up. in my district particularly, I really don't have large dairy farms. So I had to look then beyond my district to see how this affects our state. So every time I make a decision on a vote, I look first at my district, who I'm representing. They're the ones that sent me there, and that's who I need to represent. If it doesn't affect our district, then I have to look at our whole entire state and how we do that. I'd like to talk just a second on the budget. As I said, I sat on the Appropriations Committee for Health, Mental Health, and Social Services. One of the things I'm really proud that we were able to accomplish this year was rate rebasing. What that means is we have healthcare providers such as Ponybird who have been providers for quite a long time, and they're getting a reimbursement at this level, and then you have a new provider that comes in and all of a sudden they're getting a different reimbursement rate, and it's at a different level, higher level, and it's really not fair to those providers that were already there. So we took steps to equalize that this year, and we really fought hard for that in our Appropriations Committee, and we were able to get that passed across the finish line, so that way we brought everybody up to an even playing field. We also expanded managed care to statewide. We've already had managed care here in Jefferson County along the I-70 corridor. They expanded it this year to go statewide. So I think that's something that's going to help everybody in the long run. It was quite an unusual last week, as everyone else has said. Unfortunately, there were a lot of bills that just languished in the Senate, bills that were important, and I'm hoping that maybe next year we'll be able to start off with a better attitude and get through more of this. I don't want to see the last week happen next year that happened this year. Important bills that were left there were bills on sex trafficking. There was also another bill on SCID, self-combined immune deficiency disease. I helped do some work on that. That would have created newborn screening for that disease and would have had, because there is a cure, and it would have saved lives for those children with SCID. So that languished in the Senate as well. So I'm hoping that next year we can all get back to work, do a better job, and end the year on a better note. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Our last Missouri legislative presenter today is Dan Schall. And Dan, if there's anything left to talk about, we'll turn it over to you.
I think you're absolutely right. I think people who went before me have covered most of it. But like they, I'd like to thank everyone for being here today. Jefferson County Growth Association, especially for what you do for Jefferson County and for our sponsors. And to the fellow members of the General Assembly up here, to Paul and Elaine and Becky, thank you very much for being part of the Republican caucus. And Dr. Kaminsky made mention of our lone Democrat. But the one thing I was taught very early on was to build relationships. And I've enjoyed getting to meet Ben Harris, and he has been a great asset to the General Assembly. And Ben, thank you for the comradeship and the conversation we've had in the back. It is truly in Jefferson City about building relationships within the building, not only just Republican to Republican, but you have to build those relationships across the aisle and also across the building between the House and the Senate. It's not as partisan as DC would be, and so we are allowed to talk to the other party, and a lot of times encouraged as well. As a freshman, Becky was absolutely right, and I think Paul was too. Sometimes we're expected to sit there, learn, listen, and be quiet, and just be quiet. Our freshman class was not going to do that. We knew that early on when we did our freshman trip in December. State statute makes it available to freshmen that want to. You can go on a tour of the state, and you tour a lot of facilities throughout the state, and it's a bonding opportunity to get to know your fellow legislators. And during that trip, we realized this class was not going to be a quiet class. Glenn Klokmeyer made mention, upperclassman said, this class definitely has a voice and wants to be heard, but we did it in a respectful way. I had the opportunity to serve on 4 committees and 1 joint committee. The first meeting I sat in, Vice Chair Gannon, Emerging Issues on Education. First bill we heard, House Bill 42, all 4 pages of it, and then it turned into an 88-page bill that I think neither the teachers nor the administrators nor anybody really liked the final bill, so therefore it must be a good bill. Some would say if no one's happy, it must be a good bill. It will certainly be a bill that will be tweaked There were some things that had to be done for the existing schools that were affected, but I think it's a work in progress. Second committee I served on was elections. My second committee hearing, we got to hear the voter ID bill. And the simple fact of requiring an ID to vote, if you held that theory or that thought, you were, during that committee hearing, my second committee hearing, you were almost run out of town. It was completely foreign to a lot of people that you would require an ID to vote. That bill didn't make it. I think we stand a better chance next year. But it was interesting to hear the opposition to requiring an ID to vote. I couldn't fathom their arguments, but it was interesting to hear. Ways and Means, I sat on a lot of taxation issues. I wasn't real familiar with those, so I sat back and learned a lot from my fellow members. I also had the pleasure of serving on a small business committee chaired by John McCarty of Jefferson County. Very interesting committee as well. Then I had the true pleasure of serving on the Joint Committee on Legislative Research chaired by Kevin England from Farmington. And it's a committee made up of both House members and Senate members. I was the only freshman on that committee. And it sounds like a strange committee, but one of its responsibilities is to approve the sale of all bonds that the state enters into. So anytime a bond, House Bill 18 and 19 had several bonding mechanisms, and we actually had to approve the sale of those after they were approved in the budget. So it is one final check, and it was very interesting and something we will have several more meetings this summer. It'll continue to meet throughout the year. I'm very honored to serve on that. The one thing going up there I found is that you need to find a balance between what you know and what you don't know. And so we tend to gravitate to things that we do know. And coming from the grocery industry and being on the Board of Education, I decided those were two areas that I thought we should look at. I filed two bills. One was House Bill 722 called the Paper and Plastic Bill, and then the other was a MSHA reform bill, which would, and I'll start with the House Bill 991, which was my MSHA bill. Serving on a school board, you see the money going to MSHA, which is Missouri State High School Activity Association, every year. You just send the money, and that allows your kids to compete. But where does the money go? Where does the gate revenue go from when they hold the football games at the big stadiums? How's that all work? So my question to them was, how's it work? So after getting a few roadblocks along the way, we decided to introduce the bill, and the bill basically made MSHA sunshineable, just like every other quasi-governmental agency, and also made them auditable by the state auditor. And we went from every 2 years to 5 years. At the end, after we heard a committee hearing, it got out of standing committee and select committee. MSHA actually made available their audit for the last 5 years available on their website. I think that's a good start, but we'll probably pursue that again next year. Of the 133 bills, Becky referred to 8 of them being 133 bills that made it to the governor's desk, and he has till July 14th, which is 44 days from now, to veto or do nothing. 8 of those were House bills, or freshman bills. One of those, I'm proud to say, was mine. It was, I would love to say it was non-controversial, but it's paper and plastic. We all get asked that question when we shop at our grocery stores. It's a simple question that we all live with, paper or plastic. Some of you may want paper, some may want plastic, some may use reusable. Very simple question. But some municipalities throughout the state are trying to limit that choice, trying to make it actually against the law to use plastic bags. And in turn, they're also trying to make it a point where you have to be taxed on that paper bag you take. I found that somewhat odd. And so we put the bill in that would prohibit that. We talked about it on the floor for a while. We made it through a committee fairly well. I didn't get any hate mail or too much hate mail from Sierra Club or the environmentalists. Well, I did, but it's okay. It's okay that they're entitled to their opinions as well. It made it out of the House, went to the Senate, made it out of the Senate committee, and went to the Senate floor. And then a little thing happened to it, got a Senate committee substitute laid to it, and over the next 6 hours and several days of, what do we have, a point of order that lasted 3 days that they were trying to figure out whether the Senate committee substitute was germane to the underlying bill. Mr. Dempsey, Senator Dempsey agreed that it was germane, so it went forward, and 6 hours later in debate, it came out with a committee substitute basically requiring not only the paper and plastic choice being protected against local municipalities, it also prohibits local municipalities from enacting minimum wages greater than the state or federal minimum wage, which some argue is already in the Constitution, but clarified it. It then passed the Senate, came back to the House, passed the House, and now sits on the governor's desk waiting for the July 14th veto, if not sooner. And I feel very confident with the vote numbers we had that we'll be able to override the veto in September. But September is a much different day than, we're still in May, aren't we? We talked about the last week of session, very, very different than what we expected. We all have different views on how and why. I think there's two events that happened. One was the right to work vote, which me and 6 other representatives from Jefferson County voted against. Me and 5 others, right? Yeah, I'm sorry, 6 of us voted against it. There was that process that happened in the Senate that slowed down the Senate. That happened. We were able to continue to try to work in the House. We then passed the right to work, or the House passed the right to work. I don't want to use the word we. The Missouri House passed it, sent it to the governor's desk. But in the meantime, we had a little scandal break in the Kansas City Star, which was very unnerving to many members of the House, and I'm sure the Senate as well. I think in hindsight, the caucus probably did the best thing possible by discussing it privately, behind the doors, talking about it, very open, candid conversations about what is expected of our leaders. Private lives, yes, but once we sign on that paper and take a public office, a lot of that private lives go out the window and we're held to a different standard. So I'm very proud of the caucus electing a new speaker. But let me digress a little bit. There was a lot of, I had a lot of anger, and I wasn't sure why. Why was I so angry about one man's actions? One, I think it painted a picture of all of us doing that, and I was hurt by that. But me and another representative were stood in the hall sometime Thursday night, late after we decided who we were going to, or the process for choosing a new speaker. It came down to, it wasn't a personal thing for me, him offending me, but it was my family and my wife that has to answer the questions now. Is your husband taking part in that activity? That is what disappoints me, and that's what made me so angry, is that she would have to deal with that. She understands, and my family understands, that being elected, you do, by being part of elected family, you do take some of those responsibilities. But that one, I think, was unfair, that they would have to answer those questions. They've done it very nicely. I think the caucus took it very well, what we did. Now we can talk about how we're going to go forward next year. I'm very excited about Speaker Richardson. I think the question, the speakership will get over. I think the right to work shutdown in the Senate, Senator Wheeler and I certainly agree that you guys have gotten over that and have started to repair that with the FRA bill on Friday afternoon. But I think there's some distrust in the House between them and the Senate that's going to take some time to heal, because we had a lot of good bills that never had the opportunity to be heard that last week. And I think that's going to take a little bit of time to heal. Maybe it'll be the first week of January, maybe it'll be the first week of February, maybe we'll get that done in November. I'm not sure when that'll happen, but I look forward to working that relationship. The last week on Friday, when slightly after 10 o'clock, when Speaker Richardson accepted and took the oath from the Supreme Court, it was time for a speech, and his remarks were, let's get back, it's not time for speech, it's time to get back to work. That final day, we were able to pass 31 bills. They may not all have been what we wanted to, but we were able to pass 31 bills that at least will, in some instances, go to the governor's desk. Other instances will be teed up and ready to go for next year. So I look forward to serving with these members up here and our fellow members that weren't able to make it today to make next year even a better year than this year. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to speak this morning.
We're going to jump to our federal legislation, a little bit of a lineup change. I'm going to ask Jennifer Hoskins from Senator Blunt's office to come up and tell us what's going on in D.C.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to be here. The senator sends his regards that he cannot personally be here. So we work a little bit different than in the state level. We usually go year-round. So we are at a break right now, but we are definitely keeping busy. This Congress, Senator Blunt serves on the Committee on Appropriations, where he is the chairman of the subcommittee of the Department of Labor, Health, Human Services, Education, and related agencies. He also serves on the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. He's on the Select Committee on Intelligence and is the chairman on the Committee on Rules and Administration. He also serves on several caucuses, including the Congressional Veterans Job Caucus, the Law Enforcement Caucus, and the Mississippi River Caucus, which I know is certainly important to Jefferson County. Also, in addition, he is the vice chairman of the Senate Republican Caucus. This is the 5th ranking leadership position, and the vice chair is responsible for keeping the minutes and serves alongside the Senate Republican Caucus chairperson. The Senate is starting to look more like the institution that Congress intended it to be. Under new leadership, there were more amendments allowed on the Senate floor in the first 4 months of this Congress than they had all of last year. Also, the House and Senate both passed a budget for the first time in the last 5 years. Only one time in the last 5 years under the previous Senate majority did the Senate even vote on a budget. The law requires it, and people should know where their legislators stand on these issues. So just a few things that the senator is working on, and there is a lot of things, so I'm just going to highlight a few of the things that he is working on. One thing that the senator did is he joined his colleagues in introducing the Federal Water Quality Protection Act, and this bipartisan legislation will ensure the protection of traditional navigable waters of the United States. There is a new EPA rule that this in particular addresses. Also, he introduced the Taxpayer Transparency Act, and it will require federal agencies to transparently disclose when taxpayer dollars are used to pay for government advertising. So whenever you see something such as advertisement in a newspaper or billboard, flyers, radio, television, internet communications, should have a line that says paid for by taxpayers. And so you'll also notice that the senator has that on all of our press releases that go out so that you know where that funding is coming from. Also, he is a co-sponsor of the REINS Act, which is the regulations for the Executive in Need of Scrutiny Act. And this act would require Congress to approve every new major rule proposed by the executive branch, which has an annual economic impact of $100 million or more before it can be enforced on the American people. Just a couple more things I wanted to highlight. He also is a co-sponsor of the Data Security Act of 2015, which some of you may been affected by all the identity theft that's going on. So what this would do, it would better protect consumers from identity theft and account fraud by establishing a clear set of national standards that would help prevent and respond to data breaches. And the last thing that I want to talk about today is he is a co-sponsor of the Death Tax Repeal Act of 2015, which would permanently eliminate the federal estate tax, which hurts Missouri families, farmers, ranchers, and small business owners. So I know that was quick, and I actually am going to have to apologize. I'm going to have to leave early. The senator is very busy in the state as well. Recently, he just finished his second tour since being elected of all 114 counties and the city of St. Louis. So he is actually in the region today talking with community health center leaders, and so I will have to leave. But if I look forward to talking with you all in the future. If there's ever something that comes out that you have questions about, please feel free to reach out to our office. And thank you again for having me.
Okay, to our radio listeners, hang on. We're in extra innings. We're talking with our federal legislative representatives today, and next up on the dais is Brendan Fahey, newly promoted to deputy director. Is that right, Brendan? And he's with Senator Claire McCaskill's office.
On behalf of Senator McCaskill's office, I just want to say it's an honor to be here this morning. Senator McCaskill sends her regards. Unfortunately, she's not unable to attend this today. She's in the western half of the state today doing a number of events, which I'll highlight in my remarks, but she wanted me to send my regards. So I'm going to try to break it down into a few issue areas, and the first one is what Senator McCaskill is working on, expanding jobs and business opportunities for Missouri. Today, actually, Senator McCaskill is hosting the 26th Annual Federal Procurement Conference in Warrensburg. This conference is a hands-on workshop aimed at expanding Missouri's jobs opportunities by connecting small businesses with resources about government purchasing practices and doing businesses with the local, state, and federal government. And that's being held today in Warrensburg, where she's currently at. Also, this month, as Senator McCaskill is a ranking member on the Senate Armed Service Committee, the Senate Armed Services approved the annual defense bill. The legislation was helped shape by Senator McCaskill as a ranking member and includes a number of important legislative priorities in Missouri. Two specifically for this region is the Resources Advocate appropriated 12 new FA-18 Super Hornets for the Navy, which is manufactured by Boeing in the St. Louis region, which has an estimated of 15,000 employees at the manufacturing plant. Also, Senator McCaskill also teamed up with Senator Portman of Ohio to introduce legislation to spearhead the Federal Permitting Improvement Acts to streamline and improve the federal permitting process, which is currently laden with uncertainty and unpredictabilities that hinder investments, economic growth, and job opportunities. Also, another important aspect to Missouri is the infrastructure needs, and Senator McCaskill has always been a long-time advocate for infrastructure and transportation funding. Currently, the state of Missouri has over 33,000 miles of highways, which is the nation's 7th largest transportation system. The state of Missouri has more highway miles than Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas combined. So it's very important. So with the federal transportation bill expiring at the end of the year, Senator McCaskill is advocating for a long-term approach, because everyone knows that in order to be able to prepare for our infrastructure, we need a long-term approach to be able to plan and appropriate the funds appropriately. Unfortunately, even if the federal government does pass that legislation, the state of Missouri currently will not be able to access those funds because they do not have the matching funds. So it's a dual threat. So we're trying to put the steps in place that the state of Missouri can advocate those, but they're going to have to take some necessary steps to appropriate additional funds to match that. Another area that Senator McCaskill wanted me to speak on is just areas that where Senator McCaskill is standing up for our troops and our veterans. Today, actually, in Kansas City, Senator McCaskill is also going to be announcing her 5th round of veterans customer satisfaction programs, which is basically a state report where Senator McCaskill empowers Missouri veterans who use the VA facilities to make recommendations on the quality of service that they receive in the state. So Senator McCaskill is going to be doing a press conference announcing those final results of what she's found with those surveys. Over 1,200 Missouri veterans had filled out the surveys this year to make recommendations, all from the St. Louis VA to Columbia, Kansas City, and Poplar Bluff. So it's a pretty dynamic program. Also, Senator McCaskill would also like me to stress, since education is a big aspect, the state and all congressional offices have the academy nomination process, and where they're currently going on right now. I know that there has been a number of Jefferson County high schoolers that received nominations to the academies this year and previous years, and if anyone who's in high school that is trying to advocate or who would like to get more information regarding the academy nomination process, please contact me. I'll be more than happy to try to get you the information of how the process works. So we're trying to really encourage you to participate in that. Second, another issue area is just continuing strengthening accountability in government. Senator McCaskill has just currently introduced Protecting Communities and Protecting Communities and Police Act, which aims to protect both the police officers and committees that those police serve by reforming federal programs that send equipment and funding to local police departments. And this is in light of the current issues that was initiated with issues that are happening over the summer, last summer in St. Louis area. So it's just basically a win-win program. She met with a number of different key stakeholders, both Chief Belmar and Chief Dotson of the St. Louis Police and the St. Louis County Police endorsed this piece of legislation and encouraged to support those. And then let me see, what else can I also highlight? Just another issue that the final one that I would just like to mention is just currently the Senate has promoted or voted on trade issues, and Senator McCaskill voted to open up debate on trade policies only after the Senate approved separate legislation that included strong enforcement measures. A lot of you probably have heard in the newspaper about the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the trade dealers that is going on. Senator McCaskill she did vote to open up that debate on that before, but the prior vote, she voted against that to try to get more enforcement mechanisms in those places. So that would be. And then just another piece of legislation that the Senate has to come back actually this Sunday to vote on is the FISA reauthorization of the Patriot Act, and Senator McCaskill supports the USA Freedom Act, which would reform the National Security Agency's bulk data collection program, which has passed the House of Representatives, with strong bipartisan support. And Senator McCaskill looks forward to supporting that piece of legislation. I believe that will be held this Sunday. So it's a unique piece of legislation that they have not need to address, and they need to address it before June 1st. So those are just a few of the issues that Senator McCaskill has been working on in the Senate this year. If you have any questions, like Jennifer mentioned before, you can always speak to me afterwards, or please contact our St. Louis office, and we'll try to get you the information that you need. So thank you for inviting me.
Again, this is Jefferson County Growth Association Legislative Breakfast. Do want to again acknowledge our sponsors, Debbie Dunnigan, Mercy Hospital, Comtree, Govero Land Services, Sheep Metal Workers, and Home Service Oil. We're in the final stretch, and a couple of years ago we had some redistricting that went on, and we went from one representative district to 3, and 2 representatives are here to talk to us about that today. And we'll start next with Jim McNichols from Representative Luchtemeyer's office. Jim?
Thank you, Ray. I want to thank the Growth Association, the sponsors, and most importantly, all of you for being here. I know the Congressman would love to be here. Unfortunately, he's detained again in the western part of the district, and they are on recess right now. But I know he would say that it means a lot to him to see engaged community and business leaders out here on issues of importance and staying informed. So I know that's a big thing. Rather than highlight specific legislation the Congressman has been working on, I was going to kind of talk about some of the things that have already been hit on and kind of get a little more specific on some of those. I know we talked about, Jennifer highlighted this issue of the House and the Senate passing a mutually agreed upon budgetary framework going forward for the next 6 years. I think that's vitally important. Basically, working off of the same sheet of music makes things a lot easier in terms of passing budget bills. And so that's kind of the direction that the House has been proceeding on. We've gotten back to something that they call regular order. In the past, when it comes to budgetary issues, in the last couple of years, the tendency of the House and the Senate in D.C. has been to pass these massive omnibus bills that nobody likes and are usually full of all kinds of things that people wouldn't ordinarily ever vote on. And so getting to the idea of voting on individual appropriations bills for the various departments and agencies is something that we're very proud of, that we can make happen. And so we've been going through the process of doing that in the House and passing them over to the Senate. I think, in terms of some other things, just in general, that budgetary framework highlights It's also a policy statement, so it talks about lower levels of federal spending and the potential of reviewing the potential of repealing Obamacare through the reconciliation process. So I think that's very important. Congressman Luetkemeyer, for those who don't know, his background is actually banking and insurance issues, and so this past year he was named as he was on the House Financial Services Committee, but he was named as the chairman of the Housing and Insurance Subcommittee, and so in that regard has been already had a great deal of familiarity with the financial industry and the insurance industry, but is learning a lot about housing. So has been meeting with a variety of housing authorities, and just actually the other day hosted the HUD secretary in Jefferson City to talk about some issues related to housing. A lot of his legislative efforts have been focused on issues in this regard, specifically Dodd-Frank issues related to some of the implementation of the regulations that have been on the financial industry. We've heard from a lot of folks, especially in banking, but also in credit unions and some of those other folks, and the real estate industry about some of the burdens that have been put on them in terms of the learning curves of some of these new rules that they're passing down. And so as much time as we spend proposing new legislation, we spend a lot of time trying to make it a little easier for industry to be able to learn make it a little slower in terms of the push for the regulation. So that's a big thing we're working on. Couple of issues that are near and dear to the congressman that he's worked quite a bit on. Operation Choke Point is one. For those who don't know, this is an issue having to do with non-traditional financial institutions. People call them the payday loan industry, pawnbrokers, some of those folks who deal with large amounts of cash and their ability to access the financial industry. FDIC, which is the Deposit Insurance Corporation, has tried a variety of maneuvers basically to try and squeeze these people's access to financial services. And so the congressman, because he's been contacted by a lot of folks in district and without, on this issue, people who, the original legislation was intended to stop drug dealers and money launderers and those kinds of things, but it's begun to impact people who have legitimate businesses and who are just trying to practice their business and make a profit and support their families. And so he spent a lot of time highlighting that issue and working on legislation and forcing the regulators to answer questions about that. So that's been a big deal. And then the other one was one that Jennifer had kind of highlighted, this issue with EPA and specifically the waters of the USA. This is a major issue. I know a lot of people, a lot of the pushback on this has been from Farm Bureau and a lot of the agricultural groups. But I can tell you, if you have a business that has stormwater runoff of any kind, this is going to affect you. This is basically EPA wants to regulate the water from the moment it falls from the sky and hits the ground. And if it forms a puddle on your property, they want to be in your business up close and personal. And so we have been fighting this vigorously. We've proposed legislation to prevent them from moving forward on this, from finalizing the rule. And as has happened with a lot of things recently, they have decided they're going to go full bore with it. So we're going to continue to fight it, but again, it's another issue, not just because of the congressman's background in agriculture, but just in general from a common sense business owner's perspective. This is going to be a major impact, a major thing that impacts a lot of business owners who don't realize it yet. And so if you guys want to find out more, we've got lots of information I'd be happy to share with you. What else? I think that was it. Just wanted to take a moment to recognize all the folks up here. I know Congressman Luetkemeyer, as a former state legislator himself, would tell you it's so critical for them in D.C. to know that they've got a good set of folks back home fighting the good fight. And I know especially on the port issue, well, not just the port issue, river issues in general. Our district has more river frontage than I think any district in the state. And so river issues, port issues, ag issues related to ports are all huge for us, and to have a good group of folks like the folks up here fighting for that stuff in Jeff City is huge. So I want to shout out attaboy to all of them for all the hard work they do, and thank everybody for being here. So.
And last but certainly not least, Donna Hickman is here, Representative Jason Smith. Donna?
When you're the last to speak, you have to have something that distinguishes you. So I have handouts today, which I will leave on the front table up here for anyone to take with them as well. I bring you greetings from Congressman Smith, who serves for you on the Ways and Means Committee in the House and is leading the fight along with Representative Luke Tmeyer and so many others against the waters of the U.S. and so many other government overreach regulations that he is opposed to. In the last session, he has co-sponsored several bits of legislation, including the Stop EPA Overregulation of Rural Americans that repeals the final rule on wood stove regulation and sends the message to an overreaching EPA that they do not need to be in the business of telling residents what type of heater to buy. Another bill is to designate Union Station in Washington, D.C. as the Harry S. Truman Union Station. And another bill to help veterans in their entry to the apprenticeship. This would give veterans the option of using their GI educational bills in enrollment to pre-apprenticeship programs, and that's currently prohibited by the Department of Labor. Our top constituent interests these days seem to be, we receive phone calls and letters having to do with Section 215 of the Patriot Act and also the trade bill. I want to let you know, too, that in May, the congressman visited 28 of the 30 counties that are part of the 8th Congressional District, including visits to Jefferson R7 High School, where he hosted Congress in the Classroom, and also at St. Pius High School, where he presented Tom Surdike with his appointment to West Point. And young Mr. Surdike joins Kelsey Kingsland of DeSoto, who will attend the U.S. Naval Academy and play volleyball. And these are two of the congressman's appointees to military academies this year. He's very excited about those. We invite you to contact us with any kind of issue you may have with a federal agency. Our office is here to help the good folks of Jefferson County navigate the often difficult federal government waters. And we also invite you to visit the congressman's website, jasonsmith.house.gov, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for the invitation to be here today.
So now we'll have a quiz over everything you've learned this morning. Wow, what a great deal of information. Again, just very quickly, I want to thank our sponsors, Home Service Oil, Metal Workers, Govero Land Services, Comtree, Mercy, and Debbie Dunnigan. I also want to thank KJF Radio, JCTV, and all of you for attending and following this morning. You can see there's a lot going on that affects Jefferson County, and your being here tells our legislators and their representatives that we do care. So with that, thank you for being here, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.